It is 10:41 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time. It is the last day of the fourth month of 2025 already. And this is episode, good Lord, what episode is it? It's going to be 1086. However, I'm going to bring you an older interview that I did with a gentleman from Scarce.City. His name is Chris Tramout. And Scarce.City is still going on, and if you've never heard of it, go to Scarce.City. It's auctions. It's sort of like eBay, but it always captured my imagination. And this is actually pre-nostr, and I do not know if Scarce.City has taken up the nostr mantle and given us insect logins and whatnot like that. But I still think that it's important to go back and revisit some of the people that have been working all this time towards, a circular Bitcoin economy. Because Scarce.City, you can buy the auction items for Bitcoin. And they've been doing this for like a long time. I have the Circle P. We're all trying to do this circular Bitcoin economy, and it's proving to be difficult. So I think it's important to go back and listen to the words of Chris Tramout as he talks about Scarce.City. Back in the day, guys, this was when I was still living in Canyon, Texas. This is like well over 3 years ago. We've been ever forging ahead on the Bitcoin circular economy. So let's go back in time and let's talk to my friend Chris Tramout one more time. Chris, welcome to Bitcoin And. How you doing today, man?
David, doing well, man. It's good to be here.
What is your last name, unless you don't want to say it?
Oh, no, I'm fully doxxed already. Chris Tramout.
Okay, how do you spell that anyway?
Tramount.
Okay, just wanted to make sure because I have this tendency. Not only do I mispronounce people's names, I also misspell them often. I'm a terrible speller. Anyway, so you are the founder, I am guessing, of this new thing called Scarce.City. Is that correct?
That's right. One of two founders. I have a technical co-founder, Aryan Jabari.
Okay, all right. So before we get into Scarce.City, let's set some tone and get some context of who you are and kind of where you come from. So take yourself back to high school. What did you want to do when you grew up?
Oh, man, that's a great question. It's funny. Like, I think back on it, and I grew up in Charleston, South Carolina. And, I just wasn't exposed to a lot of like the really interesting careers at that time. So, for me, like I was good at math. So I was like, I guess I'll just be an engineer because that's what math people did as far as my environment goes.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, there was like the business route, but I was like, I don't really see myself as a business type of guy, at least the way I thought of it then, which was like, in Charleston, it was like the bankers, right?
Right.
I had no concept of tech startups, not that anyone really did back then, or anything like related to technology. I will say that I did go through a small phase where I wanted to be a fashion designer.
Nice.
Which has like become almost relevant now.
Well, yeah, we will see that a little bit later on in the interview. That's awesome though, man. Not many people want to do that. I have this weird thing about I just got this weird thing about high fashion when I'm looking at like, I don't know, Dior releases the spring line or whatever, and I'm looking at the models on the catwalk, and I'm looking at the stuff going, nobody's gonna wear that. I don't understand.
Yeah, no, and to be fair, like I was always interested more in like the streetwear stuff, none of the like, high end.
Gotcha. So fashion designer, nice. So okay, so you're bumping along in high school, thinking about either fashion or possibly engineering, and whoa, where did you run up against? When did you run into Bitcoin, or did it run over you? Some people have that.
Oh man, I think I first heard about it back in 2012, 2013. Uh, totally wrote it off from the beginning. And it's everybody has a similar story, but it's always kind of embarrassing.
Yep.
And for me, like I'm most embarrassed because like I understood the supply cap, and that's why I wrote it off, because I had this idea that a deflationary currency will never be used. Right? People are
Hmm.
disincentivized from spending it, so it'll just it'll never work. And I didn't have the understanding of the different functions of money. It didn't occur to me that money could be a pure store of value, or unit of account. I just wasn't thinking like that. And of course, I never gave Bitcoin my full attention to really understand it,
Right.
up until I came in. The flip switched for me in 2017. So still consider myself a freshman in the space.
Uh-huh.
Um, but I think what really did it for me was I came to the realization that the Fed was just never going to stop printing, uh, and I started thinking about where's the money going to go? Like only so much can go into gold, like and it's just a rock. Like there's only so much we can do with that. So there's got to be another place for it to go, and that's when I gave Bitcoin a second look. I had also been really into just studying technology and software at that time, and had seen the progression play out over and over, where you see some initial technology, it looks really clunky, it's really hard to use, but then sure enough over time it gets better and better, and all of a sudden it becomes somewhat ubiquitous. So kind of being trained through that lens,
Yeah.
and looking into the future of how uh, current systems were going to play out, I finally wisened up to what was going on.
Well, to be fair, none of us were taught what money was. I mean, even back in my high school days, which was quite a while ago, it was almost as if it was a theme. You go to economics class and you do other homework, or you snooze, or you just space totally out. And I start like hell. I mean, you could even watch movies where they had like there's a Ferris Bueller's Day Off. One of the most famous scenes in that movie is the snooze fest in economics class, because it was just this droning on of this guy who actually, the actor that did that was a speechwriter for Nixon.
Right.
Yeah, and I always found that like just really really odd. But it's almost as if it was on purpose, because none of us know what money is. So
Yeah.
you certainly can't be blamed, man.
Right. No, that was the assumption. Is like, okay, we have money. Don't question that. And now
Right.
we'll tell you how it works, like everything you can do with that money. But like, we're not going to talk about what's really at the foundation of this thing.
Yeah, and I think a lot of us start, when we got into Bitcoin, the very first, one of the very first things that we started doing was started asking ourselves questions about the one thing that we always took for granted and that everybody knew about, and that was money. And then once that door opened, it was like you just start seeing just how messed up everything else is, because half of all transactions in human existence is value transfer
Yeah,
with money.
absolutely.
It's so yeah. So okay. So now you're firmly kind of planted into Bitcoin. You're chugging along. You've been slapped in the face a couple of times. You get in at 2017. You start really freaking out about the bull run, and then scarcity happens. Where
Oh
where
yeah.
did that come from?
Well, there was like a whole bear market in between there, which
Of course.
is hard to just brush over. But yeah, it I think my path is not too dissimilar from many Bitcoiners, where you get into Bitcoin, it just takes up all of your attention,
God,
and
I
it
know.
becomes hard to focus on anything else. And
Uh,
I realize as I'm like in my regular job that I can't focus on anything that's not related to Bitcoin. And I'm like, as a professional, I'm just not going to be using my skills to the best of my ability, or my time the best that I can if I'm not doing something related to Bitcoin. So I was looking for a way into the space. And, my background before then, a lot of it had been centered around retail e-commerce. So it's an area that I have a decent understanding for.
Hmm.
Uh, and I was in touch with a Bitcoin artist, and we were just chatting, and they wanted to sell some clothing that fit with some of the properties of Bitcoin, such as verifiable authenticity and supply.
Hmm.
Uh, and just kind of like, being a total pleb at the time, I assumed that was a solved problem.
Yeah.
And it was only after looking into it some more that I realized that's actually a pretty hard problem
Yep.
and far from solved. So I started looking into it, and we came up with a rudimentary solution that we tested out with some face mask sales, and from there we've been able to build a little bit of a community, and that's helped us come up with, I think, some better ideas.
Yep.
And it's kind of brought us to where we are right now. We've just been testing a few things out, and we have some big ideas for the future.
So how long has this baby of yours been crying? I mean, when did when was opening day, so to speak?
Opening day was, I think, in March. Actually,
So
no, it
the
probably wasn't, because we started building in March. My co-founder, he and I were working together at the same startup before we got laid off with COVID,
uh
and I kind of talked him into trying this out with me. So I think we were building for maybe 2-ish months before we launched anything. So it's probably
yep.
May. It's probably May, late May, I think. But the idea had been cooking for at least 6 months before then.
Okay. So now that we've talked about the birthing of that which is scarcity, it's time for us to talk about what scarcity is. So let's start out with a nutshell description, like your 5-minute elevator pitch. What is scarcity?
Sure. So I'll start out with the 20-second elevator pitch. Is
Okay.
Scarcity is a marketplace that uses Bitcoin, Lightning, hopefully future layer 3 protocols to support Bitcoin culture and adoption.
Okay. All right. So now this is seems to be based around the Lightning Network and Lightning auctions, and I'm looking at the your scarcity, or Scarce.City website right now, and this seems to be, what I'm seeing is like, hey, look, I read your white paper, so it looks like, it's like, hey, look, I'm going to sell you this T-shirt, and we're going to take a Lightning payment for it. But there's much more to it than that, because it's auctions, it involves the Lightning Network and third parties shipping and stuff. So let's start with a Lightning auction. So you got some artists, they want to sell T-shirts. They come to you and say, I want to sell my shirt at auction. Let's kind of dive in, or put our toes in the water right around there. Can you kind of start detailing this out a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So the clothing we did in the past, that wasn't auction based. That was just
Okay.
a fixed price. And because we did have a mechanism for verifiable supply, we were like increasing supply with each item sold and doing some cool stuff there. Uh, but our newest, what I would call product, is Lightning auctions, and we're going to be focused on original art, and specifically Bitcoin art, at least in the beginning here.
Okay.
Uh, and we're still a few weeks away from putting this out into the wild, but we have it in our test net. It's working great. The idea here is that we're running auctions that use Lightning payments to keep bidders accountable for their bids, while requiring minimal fees and minimal personal information from bidders.
Okay.
So the way this works step by step is, we're trying to keep this as simple and clean cut as possible. You go into the auction site, you check out the product, you check out the bids that have already been placed, you see how much time's left on the auction. You decide you want to place a bid. You input your bid amount, input it into sats. We're keeping that as the standard, but we do the auto calculation for you to US dollars. And you put in an email address. And, we really don't want people to be putting in their like personal email address. It can be
Right.
any email address. We just need it to verify that the winning bidder placed, the winning bid, and also to refund your collateral back to you. And if it's your first time placing a bid with that email address, you input a display name, which you only input once. When you make subsequent bids with that email address, that auto populates. And once you submit that information, you're brought to pay a lightning invoice, which can range anywhere from $5 to, on the very high end, $50, which is a percentage. It's a small percentage of the amount you actually bid, and it acts as your collateral for that bid. So
Okay.
at the end of the auction, once it's all said and done, everybody gets their collateral back, except in the case where the auction winner does not pay the amount they said they would pay. And in that case, they lose their collateral.
Okay.
And the next highest bidder would become the winner of the auction.
Okay. So I've got, like, let's say that I've got something like a piece of Bitcoin art. I put it up for auction and I get notified that somebody has bid on it. And then I continuously get notifications that somebody's bid higher until time runs out and the winning bidder does one of two things: pays all of the rest aside from the collateral that he already put up. Like, I think what did you say was like 5% of the total price?
We're still playing with the percentages, but
Okay.
at a very minimum, it would be $5.
Okay.
If it's a very expensive bid, we're willing to push it up to like $50, but that's about as high as we want to go.
Okay. Yeah, I get it. So now does the winning bidder that chooses to pay and be honorable and all that, do they go ahead and complete with another Lightning transaction? Or at one point or another, do they have to break away and go to the main chain and do a full Bitcoin main chain transaction?
Yeah, so the items we're going to be auctioning off here, we expect to be in the hundreds, if not thousands of dollars in total value. So these would be on-chain transactions once you're actually paying the full amount.
So at that point, only the Lightning Network is only leveraged to make sure that people play fair, right?
That's exactly right.
Okay, I just want to make sure that I'm clear on that, because sometimes I'm not clear with myself on certain things. So now, are you guys running your own Lightning node to do this, or are you leveraging someone else?
We are using BTC Pay Server, which makes it easy for us. But yes, we are running our own node.
Now, have you guys done any kind of simulation as to, let's say this thing just really takes off and you've got multiple auctions going on. I'm talking like, let's pie in the sky. Let's say you've got like 100 auctions that are live at the exact same time. Have you guys simulated at what point you might need to actually start, either leveraging an outside source? Somebody's like, I can't remember who it was, just announced that, was it? Oh, I almost had the name, but they're spinning up lightning nodes in the cloud that you can rent. Have you figured out at what point? Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Yeah, they're fantastic. Yeah.
Would there be a point at which, running it, shake and bake on your desktop is just not going to cut it anymore? Do you know when that point is, or if that point even exists?
It's not a near-term problem for us. So I should
Right.
clarify that we are taking a curated approach to this.
Okay.
So it's not going to be like self-serve. Anybody can start an auction, at least not anytime soon.
Okay.
We want to very carefully control what is being put up for auction. And it's not just us. We have a community that helps us make these decisions.
Right.
But yeah, we're going to be taking this baby steps from the beginning. It would be fantastic if in like sometime within the next few months we get to one auction a week. But part of this is we want to get as much attention around each individual auction as possible.
Okay.
So there is a certain limitation there. And, as far as like growing the business, we think there's like interesting ways to bundle other sales from most likely the same artist
Uh-huh.
into the auction.
Right. Now I'm looking at this and I used to run a guy's, I was helping a buddy of mine out at his business a couple of different times. And he actually he was modifying Dish Network units and then reselling them on eBay, mostly to Canada. And I won't get into the parameters of the modification because, it's probably not a good thing to talk about. But,
Uh-huh.
but we moved into, auctioning all kinds of solid goods. I mean, things that are, fairly meaty. Is this going to I know that I would imagine that your answer in the near term is it's just going to be art, but do you have any further thoughts of like I got a Fender twin amplifier. I don't really use it anymore and I'd like to be able to auction that off. Is that something that you might do in the future? Go past close, lightweight shippable goods to where we get into some heavier items, or is that just like, nope, we're not even going to touch it?
I certainly wouldn't shut it down completely. I will say, like, our mission that we do want to stay as true as possible to is like everything we do, we want it to be for Bitcoin adoption and culture.
Right.
So if we find that there's a demand for something that aligns with that mission, we're totally open to it.
Yeah.
Now,
Oh, go
sorry, I was
ahead.
just going to say, yeah, but the demand portion is really important, right? Like, and what is important to us is that all of our transactions are in Bitcoin,
Mm-hmm.
and certainly at this point in time, there are only a few types of transactions that really make sense to be made in Bitcoin,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and where we're seeing that is in Bitcoin collectibles, Bitcoin art. It's absolutely fascinating to go into the Bitcoin talk forums and see auctions for some of these Bitcoin collectibles being done in like very rudimentary Web 1.0 forum, and it's
Right.
because the people in these forums, like, they are purists, like they only want to sell and buy with Bitcoin when it comes to Bitcoin collectibles.
Right.
So to us, that's the first sweet spot that we want to go after. uh, I think over time the types of transactions happening over Bitcoin will expand, and those will become addressable for us. But we want to make sure that you know the the desire to transact in Bitcoin is already there before we move into that.
So I'm assuming that you guys are reaching out to some of the, more well-known artists directly and saying, "Hey, we got this thing. Will you kind of, help us out? Like, consider, putting some stuff up like Lucio Paletti and some of those guys."
Yeah, we have an all-star cast of Bitcoin artists in our Telegram group. We're battle testing all of our ideas and prototypes against them. They've been hugely helpful in just helping us understand what's important to them. Uh, and Yeah, we have a process for admitting new members. Everybody votes on it. My vote is worth the same amount as any other person in the group. So yeah, it's we wouldn't have a chance without having the acceptance of the Bitcoin artist community, and they've just been hugely helpful already.
Okay. So, let's see. Just marking stuff off my list here. Shipping and delivery. The white paper mentioned something about integrating with tracking the package. Is it? Did I read that wrong, or is that indeed what you guys are doing?
Um, so the white paper probably could use an update.
Okay.
We're really focused on the auctions now, and depending on how that goes, you'll probably see a pretty significant update to the white paper.
Okay.
But the way we are structuring the auctions is we act as an escrow service. So when the auction is complete, the winner of the auction, they pay us, and then we work with the artist to make sure that the art is packed securely. And once it's put into the mail and sent to the auction winner, we receive tracking for that, and that's kind of our verification that the artist has done their part at that point,
Right.
and we pay them. Now, of course, there's still plenty of risk in the process from there of the art getting from point A to point B, and that's where we offer insurance service. And because we are working with the artist to make sure that the art is packed securely, we're comfortable taking that risk. Of course, we are getting compensated for it. Uh, but the point here is we want to give the buyer as much security as possible that they're not at risk of the item being damaged or lost in transit.
Right. Do you guys leverage like the Postal Service insurance stuff, like where, you get the artist to say, hey, this thing costs this with a tracking number. We need, it'd be nice to have proof of insurance that in case it does get lost, that there's some kind of recompensation. Do y'all do anything like that?
It's the same basic idea,
Oh,
but
okay.
we're taking it on ourselves.
Okay, because we used to do that. Well, that was mandatory when we were shipping stuff around the United States. Everything was insured. That way, worst case scenario, we could ping the post office or whoever was doing our shipping that offered insurance. I think we only shipped with USPS for that reason because they were the only ones that had a good insurance thing. But so the let's say that it's not a digital piece of art; it's a physical piece of art. Auction has been won. The guy has acted, in an ethical manner, has gone ahead and paid the full price for winning the auction. Now it's up to the artist to ship that thing and pack it well. And then you guys are taking on that, the meat space risk. So when the package actually arrives to the person, the winning bidder, does the winning bidder, do they, have a obligation to contact you and say, yes, it arrived. Here's a, screenshot of it, or yes, it arrived, but it's damaged. And here's where the damage is. Is that how you would assess that, that those kind of issues on their end?
Yeah, it would be more of like we don't need to know anything unless something went wrong.
Uh-huh.
Uh,
Okay.
and of course, we would need proof of that in some form. And it's a great question, and something that we're thinking through really closely right now, and the best way to do that. But if everything goes well, we don't need to hear from the buyer from then on.
Okay. Okay, that actually does make sense. We would never hear from our customers unless there was something wrong either. But yeah,
Okay.
that whole thing with the interconnection between Bitcoin, Lightning Network, all this stuff, and meat spaces, I think is much trickier than we're giving it credit for. And as the problems continuously pop up, it'll be like whack-a-mole, and we'll eventually we'll just crush them when they come down. But the minute that edge between Bitcoin and actual space is just, I think there's a whole lot of growth potential in figuring out how to solve logistical problems there. And I don't see anybody actually doing it. I mean, you guys are there at the edge because you have to do stuff in meat space. But I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity for Bitcoiners to go, there's a million problems here that could be solved, and here's the solution. So um,
Yeah, we're thinking along the same lines.
yeah.
The challenge in solving the problem is our opportunity.
So when are you guys gonna? I think you guys you're saying that you're pretty much still in the testing phase. Is there a beta coming up that people can look forward to? Is there some way for listeners to take part of this?
Yeah, we're I want to say 2 to 3 weeks out from launching our first Lightning auction, and
Okay.
we have a very special work of fine Bitcoin art that's just finishing up production. We're still kind of keeping that close to the vest, but there will be a big announcement once it's ready to show.
Okay, do me a favor, let me help out when you're about ready to release. If you'll ping me on that tweet or whatever social media that you're, all that stuff. I'll help, relay that message, because I know it's hard to get traction in a space that's filled with so much noise.
That's for sure. I appreciate that. I'll definitely keep that in mind. Thank you.
Okay, so now we're going to shift gears. There's some things that you wanted to talk about, and one of the first ones, because we have been talking about art, and sometimes they're in meat space, but often we're seeing this stuff, these non-fungible token art, and it's been kind of coming to Bitcoin more and more and more. And you wanted to say how it's creating a new renaissance. I'm really interested in pulling those thoughts out of your head.
Yeah. So I figured if we're going to talk for an hour, I have to have one point where I try to stir the pot up a little bit and say something controversial.
Oh
But,
no.
but when I first heard of NFT art, I thought it was totally crazy. But I felt a responsibility to do some due diligence here. Like, we're at least in a tangential space. I need to understand what this thing's all about. So got into it, bought a piece of NFT art, um, and certainly has many pitfalls, which I'm happy to go into. But the one thing that I realized really quickly is that the community of artists and collectors are just so unbelievably enthusiastic, and I've learned the hard way to not discount something that looks silly with a really enthusiastic community.
Hmm.
And it's what's been proven for sure is that there's demand from real collectors for this type of art, and what that has incentivized is the creation of just incredible works of art. And now they are purely digital, but because
Yeah.
they are digital, they're able to create entirely new experiences that just aren't possible in the real world.
Right.
And yeah, in my mind, the flywheel has already kind of taken shape, where the art is getting better, which is going to attract different types of collectors. And at the same time, one of the biggest knocks on this thing is I can just copy and paste this and view it in my phone browser just the same. But you have this whole infrastructure layer that's being built around it because there is real demand here. And there's going to be new ways to interact with this type of digital art that just wasn't possible before. So I think all of this it's in motion now. Like, the format of it, I have no idea. I think we're just scratching the surface of
Yeah.
what's possible here. And there's a ton of problems in this space. There's straight up fraud. There's plenty of wash trading, and it's all at the foundation is on Ethereum, which I think probably many of your listeners and I would share the view that that's shaky foundation.
Yeah.
Um, so it's interesting going through the experience of buying one of these things, because what it felt like to me is that I'm holding basically uh, ether, but in a more expressive way.
Right.
Um, which is kind of cool, but also comes with a whole lot of risk, right? Like, you're not only betting on the work of art, you're betting on the artist, you're betting on like the NFT concept, and you're
Right.
betting on the blockchain that it's all on.
Yeah.
And like, the platform has already shifted. I don't know if you remember the rare peeps or rare pepes, or I don't know how to
Yep.
pronounce
Yes, I do.
it.
I remember the rare Pepes
Yeah,
very well.
yeah. So like, some of that art's really cool. Some of the artists are great, but I don't think those rare pepes are going to be worth too much going forward, because that platform has just kind of become, it's become less relevant, right? So
Right.
um, my point here is that I think there's really interesting potential, but a whole lot of risk, and I think it can become much more interesting if it comes to Bitcoin, because then you're not just holding Bitcoin, you have ways to hold Bitcoin in more expressive ways,
Yeah.
and you've been de-risked somewhat by holding it on a blockchain that, in my mind, is much more secure.
Yeah, I agree. I was talking, the first interview that I did was with Samson Moe and his art director, Wayne Wan Chong, from the Infinite Fleet game. You familiar with that?
I'm not familiar with that one specifically.
Yeah, you know who Samson Moe is?
Yeah, yeah.
He a guy from Blockstream, lizard person, apparently going to kill us all, but no, he's actually a really nice guy. But you know, he's chief strategy officer at Blockstream, but in I guess in the at night he becomes video game developer. And if you haven't checked out Infinite Fleet, it's definitely worth taking a look at. But they're
Okay.
using the Liquid sidechain inside their game with what's called the INF token, which is a token pegged to Bitcoin or it's pegged in a way to Bitcoin because it's through the Liquid network.
Right.
Now they are actually doing NFTs in a way. And the
Yep.
way that they're approaching it is as video game, items like buying a new ship, but there's also the potential for art to come in there too. One of the things that I think about a lot is, some of the best art that I've ever seen in my entire life is in video games.
Mm-hmm.
And like my favorite game ever, and it took me years to actually play it. I'd heard about it, but by the time that I played it all the way through, it was already like 7 years old, and that's BioShock. And some of the
Mm.
art inside that game, the architecture, the way that they did things was absolutely just brilliant. And I
Yep.
keep thinking about the fact that I can only experience that art either by firing up the game or looking for screenshots or firing up the game and taking my own screenshots. That's the only way you're getting that art out of that game. Well, here comes NFTs. And what I
Right.
think about that is that, being able to play, new games that come online, like maybe from Satoshi's Games or Donner Lab, the guys that are really working with Bitcoin inside their video games, is to be able to pull art out and you buy that as an NFT, and it's sort of kind of licensed to you. Not that you own it, but it's licensed to you. And then there's the other way that goes in, and I'm thinking what you're talking about, and NFT artists creating one of these things and then being able to license their art and have it appear in a video game where their
Yeah.
art is actually selected by one of the art developers or art directors at a video game, saying, dude, Lucho's stuff would be perfect in this room because it has this kind of architecture. And they contact Lucho and he says, yeah, dude, I'll either license you these that I've got on the shelf, or I'll do you a custom piece. And then all of a sudden the artist gets paid. Never had to do anything with, to fly to Amsterdam or wherever these companies are and, hang out with them, and all of a sudden you can crowdsource all the art that you need and have licensing potential on all of it. So I don't think you're far from the truth that this is helping to create a new renaissance here, man.
Yeah, I agree. At the end of the day, this is software, right? So it's
Right.
it's it's essentially just programmable art, and that's why I think we're just scratching the surface at what's possible here. When you start getting into commercial rights and exclusive content that comes with that NFT, there's just a world of possibility. And already, what I think is so fascinating is already you have hundreds, if not thousands, of artists all around the world that now are able to make a living off of not just selling art, but like selling art that they really wanted to make. I brought up the Renaissance because I think about like some of the great artists from the Renaissance, like Leonardo da Vinci. From my understanding, a lot of his money was made through commissioned work. Like he wasn't even, that wasn't coming straight from the heart. Some of these works, and
Right.
because we have this, token model where there is ownership associated with the art. Now, you can argue about like how legitimate that ownership is, but as a social construct, we've kind of agreed that okay, yes, you own this, I own that, we can trade them, whatever. And because we have these open marketplaces where we can reach an infinite number of people buying and selling these digital art tokens. You know, now an artist, if they're talented, they can create, you know, the art that they want to create. And if it's good, they just need to find one buyer, and these marketplaces make it possible. So to me, that's a beautiful thing, and is going to do amazing things for creatives. And what's great for creatives is great for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. And what you were talking about, the commissioned works of people and artists in the, you know, the original Renaissance, you know, those people were bounded by borders, distance. There was no telecommunications. Letters took, you know, God only knows how long it took a letter to get from Italy to, like, I don't know, you know, Germany or something like that.
Right.
You know, now with commissions, you know, commissioned works at this point, there are no borders. Communication is instantaneous. It's going to be real interesting to see how this one rolls out. I'll tell you that, man.
Yeah. I mean, we're super excited about it. And that's why we want to be pioneers in bringing it to Bitcoin. We think it's a huge opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So now we go from NFTs. Let's talk about punk rock.
Let's
What
talk
you got?
about
What's baking in your brain about punk rock?
Yeah, this one's been on my mind. You know, it's not for me. It's I listened to Peter McCormick podcast. He had on this dude from The Clash. I think his name's
Yeah, yeah.
Keith Levine. Did you listen to that?
Oh, I listened. I actually had to listen to that one twice because I was had an emergency. I had to make an emergency run from Panhandle of Texas to Southwest Colorado because my sister had broken her foot.
Oh
I
no.
started at 4 o'clock in the afternoon to basically embark on a 10-hour drive that was going to put me somewhere in Colorado around 2 o'clock in the morning. And yeah, Keith and Peter were my wingmen on that particular trip, and that was a ballers interview, man. Because that dude got it. He just understood, and I'm like, man, punk rockers, check him out.
Absolutely. And he's the type of guy too where he can just keep talking and you're like, yeah, just keep talking and I'm listening. Whatever you got to say, like I want to hear. He's just such a fun guy to listen to.
Yeah,
Um, but but like, you know, it really resonated with me hearing him talk about it because he's talking about the punk movement and whatever. And I wasn't around for that. But you know, I did kind of come of age in like the grunge period, which had a similar like stick to the man type of vibe.
right.
And when I look back on that, what was really interesting is like that whole movement was broadcasted to the public through MTV,
Hmm.
right? Like all the music videos, all the live performances, Kurt Cobain totally strung out, flipping off the camera, like that was all we saw all that, and it
Right.
was amazing. Um, but then I don't know what happened first, but you know, like grunge kind of ended, and around the same time, MTV stopped playing music videos, and they started playing the real world, whatever. But
Yeah.
it almost feels like it was like a form of censorship, and maybe
Uh-huh.
this is just me how I remember it. Uh, and you know, I can't think of a single counterculture movement like since then that's been widely broadcasted through the mainstream media. And You know, of course, mainstream media has become much less relevant since then. But even now in social media, we have cancel culture. So, like anything that's controversial, it faces some type of censorship. So, you
Right.
know, coming back to Bitcoin, like Bitcoin is the ultimate counterculture movement. It's the ultimate stick to the man, but Bitcoin is not censorable. And, you know, of course, most directly in its transactions, but also in its culture and its narratives. Like we have what's Michael Saylor call it, the cyber hornets, right? Like we're the decentralized pack of cyber hornets. Uh, you know, we're going to keep talking about Bitcoin.
Yeah.
You know, of course, we have Twitter, which is kind of a central point of failure. Thankfully, we have Jack on our side there. But, you know, if Twitter gets shut down, like we're going to find a way to continue talking about Bitcoin.
Yeah.
So I feel like, you know, there's a lot of parallels there. And just like with, you know, punk rock and grunge, like the cultural movement was so important. And I feel like Bitcoin, along with being a financial revolution, is a cultural revolution. And as part of that culture, there's like physical items. Like I want T-shirts, I want art, so that I can, represent my tribe here. Um, I keep seeing the guy on Twitter who like just goes in the middle of the street and starts yelling Bitcoin. I can't
Oh,
think of his
that
name,
dude. Yeah.
but like I've been thinking about it recently. It's like I get this guy. Like if you're into Bitcoin, you just have this urge to start yelling Bitcoin. Like all of our normie friends are sick of hearing about it from us, but like there's a strong need to express enthusiasm for Bitcoin.
Yeah.
So anyway, this is what we want to help support and promote.
Yeah. I think I get what you're saying, because you could, back in the punk rock days and even in the grunge days, if you had something to, if you were feeling particularly, I don't know, salty or whatever, and, put on the Clash, and that's sort of making a statement. It's playing that
Yeah.
song loud is in a way, not only just because you want to hear it, in many other ways. It could be, the old lady next door, bitched me out for walking on the sidewalk, even though that's not her property. So I'm going to open my windows and play fuck you from whoever,
Right.
that's,
Yeah.
you can make that statement. And here, every time I make a Bitcoin transaction, I'm making a statement. Not only in my
Absolutely.
I'm not just transmitting value, I'm transmitting my absolute and utter disdain for all the stuff that I grew up with that was an actual lie, but was never told to me that it really was a lie, because there was nobody around who believed anything, anything different. Yeah, they all believe the same lie. We've been lied to since before your grandmother was a baby.
Yeah.
We've been lied to a lot longer than that, probably. But, definitely in my time when I grew up thinking so much stuff. And now, through, once you get into Bitcoin, like I said, once that first question pops about, well, what is money? It doesn't take you long to figure out what it was and how we screwed it up. So every transaction is like me playing a song very loud for the lady next door of the Clash.
Yeah. That's exactly it.
And we need to shift in to something else that you put on the list, which was the psychology of buying with Bitcoin, and we kind of touched on that just a little bit. What's your thoughts?
Yeah. So my experience was, as I kind of mentioned, I initially wrote off Bitcoin because I thought it would never be used for transactions. But eventually, I wanted to buy some Bitcoin stocks, right, from
Uh,
I think it's the Mount Sox guys. I probably got
right?
that wrong.
No,
Uh,
Mount Sox.
Mount Sox, yeah. And after I bought them, like I've never been more excited to get socks or like maybe any piece of clothing for that matter.
Uh,
And it made me realize there's a psychological impact of spending with Bitcoin, especially for something that can only be bought with Bitcoin.
right.
Uh, it made me feel like nostalgic as a kid when my mom would take me to Toys R Us once a month and I could spend $5 on a toy. Like when I got that toy, I really valued that toy because I used like my like scarcest resource to get it. And I kind of
Right.
felt the same way with these socks. Like I spent like the money that I really value to get these socks. So look, I mean, I think as I kind of mentioned, I think we're a long way from using Bitcoin for everyday purchases. Generally, like fiat goods should be bought with fiat. But
Right.
I think there's plenty of special purchases specifically in Bitcoin culture that not only do people want to sell them for Bitcoin, but people actually appreciate buying them with Bitcoin. So yeah, that's why I think that's the most interesting area for us to go after.
Did you take part in the Citadel 21 physical magazine when they launched that?
Yeah, yeah, no, I've got an issue one and issue two. Yeah, it's the same thing. It ties back to kind of the grunge stuff too. Like these are the cultural elements of this revolution, and
Mhm.
getting these things, it just having it in your hands feels amazing.
Yeah, and it wasn't, for me, it was, getting the magazine, and I don't want Huddle and Not and Katya to take this the wrong way, but getting the physical magazine wasn't anywhere close to the rush that I had when I was sitting there with my finger on the button, and then
Yeah,
the countdown stopped, and I like hit buy immediately. I logged in, got in. I was already logged in, but I was like, I got to the store page, and I'm just waiting for the auction to actually start. It starts up, go there, hit buy, and all their servers burnt to the ground because they had one server that they had, from what I understand, they had one server that was handling the load, and we, like all the Bitcoiners, had spread the news so majestically for
Wow.
free that the response was way more than their little server could handle. So it burns to the ground. We start, we're having a good time on Twitter talking about how this is, it's amazing and look at what's happening and all that kind of stuff. And then they bring 3 more servers plus the original one online. And I've never felt so much joy in purchasing something, especially for $21
Yeah.
than I did at that moment. So, cause I'll go to not eBay, Amazon to buy something. I don't get charged up. I don't I'm just going, God, I got to spend more money.
Right.
Really? And it's just a drag. And this, from a psychological standpoint, I kind of like spending money or spending Bitcoin, but I only do that through the LN strike so that I can convert dirty fiat immediately to, Bitcoin that is then sent to the vendor. That I don't mind, but I don't like spending out of my cold storage. So there's that. So yeah,
Yeah.
there's
I mean,
some real intricacies here.
yeah. And you bring up LN Strike. I haven't been able to use it yet. It's not available in New York, but that takes it to the next level. Not
Right.
only are you spending money that you value, but you're burning money that you don't in exchange for money that you value.
Again, yeah, that's a perfect way to put it. Not only are you buying something of value that you want with money that you're excited about, and at the same time putting this lie into a brown paper bag, pouring diesel on it and lighting it on fire. There's nothing. That's a great punk. That goes back to the whole punk rock thing. Honestly,
Exactly.
you
Yeah.
know. So now it's the future. So you got something about the future of Bitcoin and LN for more than just payments. This seems like a good place to transition to that.
Sure. Yeah. So, it was interesting when we did our first sale. We sold some face masks, uh, and like going into that sale, we weren't even sure we were going to support Lightning
Uh-huh.
because we saw it as like MVP, minimum viable product. We wanted to keep it as bare bones as possible, but it just so happened to be during a time when fees were spiking. Actually, I think it was just after the halving, so it was late May. So fees were up, and we were like, okay, we got to support Lightning, right? And we were blown away that over a third of our transactions were in Lightning.
Yeah.
And up to that point, I had just been a passive observer of Lightning.
Mm-hmm.
And from that moment, I was like, okay, I got to try this thing out and see what this is about. So, got set up on a Lightning wallet, and it was the first payment that I made. And I'm not even sure what it was for, but like it was just a total aha moment. Like, oh, well, this is definitely the future of at least Bitcoin payments, if not, much more. So that kind of took me down the whole Lightning rabbit hole and saw all the use cases that were being tested with microtransactions and the whole primordial soup going on there. But then, at some point in my research, I came across it was actually Ryan Gentry's piece.
Yeah.
Uh, he wrote a piece for Multicoin when he was back there, and I can't remember the name of it exactly. It was something like Lightning as you know Web3 infrastructure. We actually wrote a blog post on it that totally dumbed it down and made it memeified because it is a pretty dense document, but
Right.
it totally opened the possibilities in my mind for what could be done with Lightning, and it goes way beyond payments. So he goes into, for example, decentralized IDs. So you can use your Lightning node public key as basically a digital identification and get all the benefits of a digital identification with that without all of the KYC and friction associated with it. So this is becoming very real right now. LN Markets has created a really great experience uh, with their web app, where you can log in either with your Joule Lightning browser wallet, if you're running your own node, or even with most other wallets at this point, you can use LN URL auth. And either way, you're just scanning a QR code and you're logged in. Boom. And not
Yeah.
only are you logged in and you have access to all of your history with that app, uh, but by default, you're making Lightning transactions, that just opens up so much possibility.
Yeah.
So that's one thing we're really excited about implementing. I think we're going to have it ready for V2 of our auctions, and there are a bunch of other things too. I think the DLCs is maybe something we can use to minimize the trust in returning our collateral payments. Some kind of smart contract on Bitcoin. There's these like TLV payments, which if you're familiar with anything really about Lightning, you know that payments can have a data payload attached to them, and in the most simple terms, that is text. So
Yeah.
you can actually, there's this website tlvshop.com, I think, and they did a test run of this where they sold sticker packs. And all you did was you made a TLV payment, which is just like any other Lightning payment, and you're putting in your shipping address into the memo field of the payment. And what this enables is like, your shipping address is never touching a database. And it's only being sent from, sender to receiver, and through the privacy of Lightning, no one else is seeing that. Like, it's as private as it gets. So
Right.
that's something we want to test out. We're super excited about. Um, you know, there's a bunch of other stuff that I'm probably not thinking about, but the point is, like, Lightning is so much more than payments. And I think a lot of the tools that it makes possible are really interesting for app developers. And I think we can bring a lot of it to life with our e-commerce web marketplace.
Well, so, speaking of that, you know, I guess the way to approach this, this question is, if the question is going to be, how are you going to deal with, um, oh, the changes that are going to come in the future? And let me caveat that a little bit. We're seeing this, I mean, the rapidity of development and releases of different things. Lightning is not going to be the last. So, there's going to be another second layer, or it could end up being going above Lightning and turn into a third layer that puts its hooks into the Lightning layer, and then Lightning puts its hooks into the Bitcoin main chain, as we know. So,
Yeah.
I'm going to try very hard not to say it this way, but what if something better comes along? And no, I'm not talking about a shit coin, guys. So give me a break if you're like, killing me. No, but I mean, like, new technologies are going to be built on Bitcoin, because this ain't stopping.
Yeah, it's totally possible. And we're totally unbiased as to what we're using, as long as it is based on Bitcoin.
Right.
My personal view is that Lightning has achieved kind of platform status,
Yeah.
where there's just so much development on it at this point, and even the L3 protocols are depending on Lightning. So I have a hard time seeing Lightning going away.
Yeah.
And part of this is also, I just believe so much in the community and the people that are working on it. I think it's here to stay. And but yeah, look, there's going to be L3 protocols. We're really excited about what's happening with RGB. That's going to open up, hopefully, a world of possibilities for us. And all of this is just so early. We can't even imagine what's going to become possible.
Right. It's so difficult to keep track of all the developments that are going on in the space. That's where I was asking the question is, it must, it's already at the point, and will continue to be the point, that if you are, in retail and you're using, decided, I just don't want to take fiat payments anymore. the amount of research that would have to be ongoing just as we enter this space. It's like, okay, you're going to take part of this space. You're going to take Bitcoin payments. You're going to do Lightning payments. Buckle up, because you're going to have to know almost everything that goes on. And it's impossible to know everything that goes on, even if you're not, having to do the business part of it. So, that's why one of the reasons I was trying to kind of gauge what, where you were at on that, because the sheer amount of research that I have to do every day, and I feel like I'm falling further and further behind. It must be really scary thinking, what if something else comes out? How could we, transition? How long would that take? And of course, there's no way of knowing unless the technology actually presents itself. So, okay.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. We're living in the primordial soup, and you never know what's going to really come to life here. So you got to be ready for whatever. And that is really challenging for product builders like ourselves. Like, so much of this is out of our control. So we have to be really flexible and nimble in the decisions we make and the moves that we make.
I think that's that nimbleness, having to be nimble in the light of what we were just talking about, is going to really train some next generation business minds to be able to be way more flexible than they are right now. So I think that that'll feed into second generation effects that Bitcoin has, even if Bitcoin doesn't touch the business that is built by the people that had to actually wade through this. Although I'll bet Bitcoin will probably be part of everyday life soon, but you get what I'm saying. It is, Chris, it's time for Shill Fest. You got to shill your stuff, man. Is there any announcements that you want to, that you've been holding back, or anything you want to say about Scarce.City?
Check us out on Twitter, Scarce.City. You got to spell out DOT. Check out our website, Scarce.City. Sign up for our newsletter. We got some really big announcements on the way. The lightning auctions, it's going to be wild. You never know what's going to happen until you throw something out there. And once we do, it's out of our hands. So, stick around and watch. Whether you're into it or not, it's going to be entertaining.
Nice. So how do they get people get in touch directly with you? You got to surely, what's your Twitter handle?
My Twitter handle is C Tremount. DMs are open. DMs are also open on the Scarce.City Twitter. So, I'm easy to find. Feel free to hit me up, however.
And that Telegram group, is there do you want to give that one out, or is that by invitation only to people that you want to come in?
Yeah, that one's invitation only at this point. But hey, if you're a Bitcoin artist and you're doing cool things, let us know. We'll take a look, and we vote as a group to see who we let in.
All right.
So we're always excited to check out new artists.
That sounds good, Chris. So if you are an artist out there and you want to get into this, contact the guys over at Scarce.City or C Tremount on Twitter, and maybe you can get entry into the super secret club.
Yeah, I hate to make it sound exclusive like that, but it's curation and quality control is really important.
Well, yeah, and it's same to be said for the auctions that you guys choose to do, because if you were to say, hey man, anybody can start their own auction and we're the platform, next thing you know, sex toys are being sold, or God knows, got something you don't want to see is all over the screen, and it's like, I don't want to do it. So yeah, curation. There's a difference between curation and censorship, and I think we know the difference there. So. All right, Chris, it was awesome. I enjoyed learning more about Scarce.City, yourself, the punk rock stories. It was a great discussion, and I really appreciate it. Thank you for your time, sir.
Well, likewise, David. This has been amazing. Thanks so much for having me on.
Oh, absolutely. And if you ever need to announce something, hit me up. My DMs are always open.
I will. Thank you.
All right. See you later, Chris.
All right. See you.
Like to thank Chris again for giving me a long interview. He was very gracious with his time, and I very much appreciate that. So again, Chris Tremount, thank you for telling us all about Scarce.City. That I'm really excited about that. Especially if it goes into either them doing it or somebody else doing it, somebody, developing a full-blown auction platform that uses Lightning auctions. It was kind of tried, Brian Hoffman was kind of doing a little bit like that. Well, not really. Open Bazaar is, different than just a full-blown auction, I think. But he kind of screwed up by going the side of Bitcoin Cash, and I think then he started accepting BSV, and that thing is almost dead. That's what you do when you tangle with Bitcoin. I became very much not interested in using that platform at all the minute that Brian started talking about how some of these other things might be better than Bitcoin. Because I'm like, you're not being a very good steward of the technology. You're in it for yourself. You're not in it for anybody else. That I'm sure that Brian doesn't believe that, but I mean, everybody who's all these companies that have done that are not doing well. Yours.org. I can't remember the guy's name because he's already slipping out of all of our collective memories. It's dead. I mean, I can't even go to, like, if I go to the website for yours.org, it's completely dead. It's a dead gateway. Doesn't go anywhere. And then he did Money Button, which is also on the rocks. And this is yet somebody else. Was it Charles X, or I can't remember. Anyway, he did the exact same thing that Brian Hoffman did, only way more vocal. And he also completely dropped any kind of support for Bitcoin and went completely BSV. That all those projects are almost dead too. Yeah, don't do that. It's just that you're playing with your life anyway. So there's not much else going on. Again, I'm going to bring you some more interviews this week for the week of Thanksgiving, and I'll see you on the other side. This has been Bitcoin and I'm your host, David Bennett. I hope you enjoyed today's episode and hope to see you again real soon. Have a great day.